start with Engineer Osvaldo Aguayo. Let me introduce him. He is from the University of Chile. He has a master's from the Catholic University in Valparaíso, and different degrees. He's been in the Ministry of Public Works for 39 years, and in the last 18 years, he's been working on basic roads. And he is an engineering providing counseling for the fiscal inspection in concessions for the basic roads program. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you and we can see your screen that you're sharing. Thank you. In our countries, we have problems regarding funding and financing for improvements in rural roads. And so we prepared this program that Nestor Barrera talked about yesterday, and we have the same problems that everybody has. So let me show you the experience that we've had with this program. First, I'm going to talk about basic roads improvement preservation that was done before the Ministry of Economy participated, and then I'm going to tell you about the evolution of this program. The basic roads are a way of working on these low traffic roads where we improve the traffic layer without changing geometric conditions of the road. Uh, and we use salts, common salt or magnesium salt or other salts which have a good effect on the road. I'm going to talk about preservation versus enhancement. When we talk about preservation, this is no problems, and preservation has to do with maintenance, which has to be done, and there's no problem in getting funding for that. But for enhancements, you need to show a certain um, profitability that you're going to get, which, because our ministry says that all investments have to be socially profitable in terms of IRR. And then there's also socially recommended. So when you have an IRR that is over 6%, then it means that it's socially um, justifiable. So this condition is reached when there are more than 700 vehicles per day, and the investment is under $470,000 per kilometer. Um, of course, in many cases, in rural roads, we are far away from those parameters. So enhancements cannot be performed. I've been in charge of this program since it started in 2003. And so we started doing some works that were under the label of preservation, and we could start working on these roads. This is what happened between 2004 and 2008. We did around 5,000 kilometers of this type of road, where the road is the same as it was before paving, and then we put this paved layer. This is even more basic, almost on the road as it was. We had one paved layer, and then from 2005, we had a goal of 5,000 kilometers. This is what Mr. Barrera presented yesterday. And then the budget committee and the Ministry of Social Development started to observe this kind of work. And in the Treasury, they noticed that we were doing preservation on this type of road, which is very different from conventional paving. If you take a look, the geometry is not optimum, there's no shoulder. So they started asking, are you paving with the money we are giving you for preservation? And so the planning ministry said, does the project come to us? Do you get our authorization? So in 2009, the budget committee in the Treasury uh, conducted a test evaluation for basic roads. So they took 6 months for the analysis of the road network. And we mentioned all of the benefits that were our goal, but the problem was that they were not preservation works. So a whole discussion started between the minister and the treasury saying this is preservation, and the others were saying no, this is enhancement. So it was back and forth for a year and a half between the Ministry of Public Works and the Treasury. So after this whole discussion, the Treasury uh, gave in a little bit, and they defined two types of basic roads for preservation and intermediate basic roads that needed enhancements. So whenever a geometric modification was needed, then it went to group number two. And there was an agreement between the Treasury, the Social Development Ministry, and the Public Works Ministry. And so they said, okay, when we talk about preservation, these are the parameters that were defined. We don't want to start this whole discussion again, confusing preservation with paving. So the TMDA should be 400 vehicles per day. The road was not supposed to be altered in its geometrical conditions for preservation, and the maximum enhancement was an asphalt protection layer. And there were more requirements. For example, maximum costs in the north was between 90,000, and in the south it was $160,000 per kilometer. We had to look for a factor showing that it wasn't a geometrical enhancement. So we agreed on 5% maximum lengths that could be widened. And so this could be allowed by the Treasury. After a few years, we started having problems because of all of the restrictions. The projects were incomplete, and sometimes they needed to cut down on certain aspects, such as road safety, for example, to comply with the maximum cost. And this hindered the projects. What happened with intermediate roads? AADT was maximum 400 vehicles per day. The geometry could be altered, but uh, it should be kept to a minimum. The maximum was a structural layer with an asphalt mix. Sorry, there was an interruption. So we started studying profitability of some of the stretches by zone, establishing HDM4, and complying with all of these requirements, we could achieve or we could be within the parameters defined. But we had a few problems also with the curves, for example, that according to the curves, we could get the maximum AADT, but it it made it impossible to execute some of the projects. So both on the preservation side and on the intermediate road side, we had problems. So in 2014, the government, the new administration, had to give a lot of, or they wanted to foster basic roads, and they started verifying what were the obstacles for both kinds of projects. There was an agreement with the Treasury and the Social Development Ministry, and we came up with a new agreement. They went to almost double the amount per kilometer, and they eliminated the restrictions on the geometry. And for intermediate roads, AADT went from 200 to 400 vehicles per day, and the maximum costs were between 380,000 and 470,000. And also there was a possibility of having uh, an ultra thin concrete layer. So the projects had fewer restrictions for preservation. You can see there was a new layer on the road with the same geometry, and in intermediate roads, we moved soil in order to get a minimum width for the road, but this was an enhancement. In 2016, we found another problem. Basic roads that were preserved gave gave you the possibility of having a protection layer, but when there was a marked slope, more than 27%, there were failures in the protection layers. And the same thing happened with restricted radius curves. So in some of the roads, we were not able to put the protection layer because of the slope, and so it was impossible to work on those roads. So we started sending letters to the Ministry of Social Development and the Treasury, and in February 2015, we requested this, and in October 2016, we got a new agreement for these special cases where the slopes were more than 9%, or the radius for the curves was under 20 meters, we could use ultra thin concrete or a hot mix. So the idea was to apply this only in the stretches of the road that uh, had some of these restrictions. So that enabled works on this road, which had a slope of 27%, and we were able to solve the problem thanks to this new agreement. And when you have these curves, for example, you have the asphalt protection layer, or you have this kind of road with which is a winding road. Then there was a technical problem because of a conflict with the Mapuche population in the south, and we had to go again and ask the Treasury for an increase in the maximum number of meters for that conflict area. In 2020, the amounts were updated according to the IPC, and this is just to show you the evolution of the basic road projects. So to sum up, in 2003, we did basic roads as preservation. In 2009, the Treasury evaluated the projects and said they were not preservation. And after more than a year of discussions between the Public Works Ministry and the Treasury, we came to an agreement in 2011 for preservation versus intermediate roads, and that agreement in 2011 was too restrictive. So in 2014, the classification was evaluated and it was modified, relaxing the restrictions and increasing the maximum amounts. In 2016, we detected that this did not work for some cases with high slopes or reduced radius in the curves. And in 2016, there was a new agreement establishing what types of protection layers could be used. So the final comments is that the 2011 agreement was very difficult, and I think the Treasury was not totally in agreement, but there was an evolution that was quite effective um, as time went by, and we were able to get better conditions. Another final comment is the benefits of these works are much more than you obtain measured in conventional profitability. So if you only take into account IRR, that's not an adequate metric. There are many other benefits that are outside IRR. And another final comment is that the experiences of this type need not be um, uh, maybe easy to replicate or have the same results, but we wanted to share with you. And that was my presentation, and I will be open to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Engineer Aguayo. He is already part of the organization of this very successful seminar, and he talked about the evolution of the financing of basic roads in Chile. Thank you very much, and thank you for sticking to your time because you took exactly your as an allocated time. So now we will go to the next presentation. Can we close your presentation, Osvaldo, please? Or, or stop share. You have to make to click on stop sharing.
Bueno, mientras el ingeniero Aguayo quita esto,
Meanwhile, I will introduce our next presentation and our next speaker, Engineer Christian Dunkerley. He's based in Montevideo. He's has responsibility on roads in Argentina, south of Brazil, and Uruguay. He studied in the UK. He was researcher on the Leeds University Transport Institute and also in the laboratory, transport laboratory in UK. He has 30 years of experience in Europe, US, Africa, Australia, and Latin America. And he's going to have a presentation on the financing of rural roads. So, while I can't share my screen, I would like to really greet Engineer Hugo Miranda, because he's one of my dear colleagues, and I worked with them a lot for a long time in Paraguay. We went all over the country, and I have very good memories of working with them because I also was in charge of the road network in Argentina. And it is a pleasure to greet them. So, can you hear me? That's okay, we can hear you. So I remind you that you have 15 minutes for your presentation and we are ready to listen to your presentation. So can you see my screen? Yeah, we can. Okay, so I would like to talk about something a little bit different from the other presentations in this session. And the reason for this presentation is that many times in the Development Bank of Latin America, in CAF and in other multilateral financing agencies, we get some consultation about how to fund or how to finance different transport projects. And it is not very clear when they come to this multilateral organization how to start the process for being granted financing or funding. We, of course, have certain procedures that have to be followed. And I think it's very important to tell everybody here how you can get this type of financing. So I will start by giving a brief summary about the Development Bank of Latin America, CAF, how we are working in road projects. For example, what is being done in Paraguay in this at this time, where we are working not just in local roads, but also in some other road networks. And I would like to give you a brief overview of some local roads, and some work we have been doing about local roads. So the Development Bank of Latin America is a multilateral bank that works in order to improve the quality of life of people in the region. Currently, the bank is strongly focused on green financing and also on supporting anything related to the regional integration. Of course, we have a clear interest in the improvement of local road infrastructure. So we have different financing products through loans. We grant loans to support different operations in the region. So this is an idea of our intervention in roads in general, not just in local roads. The CAF portfolio, it's about $1 billion, approximately $22 billion. And over 1/5 of that money is for road projects, not just for main roads, but also for local roads. And I would say that this percentage of the portfolio is devoted to these road projects, and 67.2% is focused on infrastructure. Of course, 22, so taking into all these into account, 22% of the bank portfolio of loans is devoted to anything related to road infrastructure, road administration. So what products do we offer or can we grant? Many of the people here in the audience that come from Paraguay already know about us because of the road number 9, Trans-Chaco Road, because we are working with other multilateral agencies such as the IDB in the construction of these main roads. But before financing the Trans-Chaco main road, we had also very important participation in operation and financing of local roads. We started with just 50 kilometers that included over 3,000 linear meters of bridges. And this was a $70 million operation that is about to be concluded. We have already granted 95% of the finances agreed upon. And we then continued providing financing for local roads. And now we have 358 kilometers. There have been 11 calls 2,200 kilometers of bridges, and this is financing of $142 million that is financed together by our development bank and by Fomplata. And the progress is about 20% now. So the CAF, the bank, has been involved in this type of projects for many years, supporting development in Paraguay and other countries in the region. We started in the eastern part of the continent, and we are also providing support to the Chaco region. So sometimes we receive calls at the bank, and somebody says, okay, I'm from this region and we have a need for a road, for a bridge, or we need to stabilize a slope, an embankment, and they even submit or come with documents to support their request. But sometimes people forget about the thing that the bank is a facilitator of public policies. So development banks support financing through request by the states. So the state is the one that has to come to the bank. The Paraguayan state, through the Ministry of Economy, should come to the bank to ask or to request for a loan or financing. So my experience, and later on perhaps Mr. Salinas can elaborate on this, but in general, to start a formal request to a development bank, whether it's CAF or any other, the Public Works Ministry, and in the case of Paraguay, the Administration of Local Roads, starts a dialogue with the direction of road planning to discuss the needs for financing. So they have first, there's an internal discussion in the government, and after this has gone through different economic evaluations, assessments, technical considerations have been also discussed, feasibility studies have been done. So after that, the Ministry of Economy of the country issues a formal request for credit to a multilateral bank or a financing agency. Once this letter comes to CAF, to the Development Bank of Latin America, then we can start discussing or considering granting a loan or a credit to this state. And what's the cycle this has to go through? First of all, we to the left, we have the request for financing. Then we start by considering the profile of this request, which is the same one used for the public investment program. So we have the location, the length, the duration, and a budget. And sometimes there's also an internal assessment done by the state requesting the loan. In this case, Paraguay, then we put up together a basic profile, and then an assessment and an evaluation. We have a formal visit of our officials that go to the specialists and experts, of course, in roads, and they go to visit on the field the proposed project or the proposed location for the projects. And we do a deep analysis of all social and environmental risks. After that, we get to develop or study a little bit more about the original profile of the state, and we elaborate a proposal for loan, for a credit that is sent to a board of directors, whether it is approved or not. And once it is approved, we go to the next step, which is the signing or the granting of the credit to the state. Then, of course, we have the bank does a tracking, a follow-up of the execution of the proposed projects in order to make the disbursements to the state. And once all the money had already been granted, all the disbursements have been done, the granting of the loan comes to a close. It is closed. So it's not that somebody comes and knocks at the door of the bank. There's a process to be followed by the states in order to send a request for a loan to the bank, to the development bank, and then the process starts in order to provide financing to a state for a certain project. I also would like to make a brief summary of the different or the basic modes or modalities for execution of local roads improvements or preservations. Sometimes, if there's not a big investment, the Paraguayan state may use its own resources and machinery, and so there's not there's a lot of involvement by the local infrastructure and not by any other. Then there are some agreements, and these agreements, the government delegates responsibilities to a local administration agency. That in general, these are maintenance work. And then we have local execution where any community, organization, or agency conducts all tasks and jobs and works. In general, they are small scale works where there's a marginal support by the public works minister, and that it's common, for example, on the Mennonite communities, where they do their own projects, or they have some support by the government. And for sure, Hugo, then afterward, it's going to correct me and to add more information, but this was just a brief overview. And also, we are producing some other knowledge products. We organize an online course with Guillermo Tenu, for example, about maintenance and rehabilitation of local roads. And we are going to organize another one in a short time, very soon. We have over 600 people attending that online course, and it has been very well accepted. So we are going to have a second edition of this course. And Guillermo collected information from all over the world in order to organize this course. And let's hope that we can have another edition during this year. And we are also developing a manual on local roads, on neighborhood roads, in cooperation with experts from Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil. And it should be ready for the end of this year or early next year. And this is all I had to tell you. It's just a brief presentation, but it was just in order to introduce the bank and to give you an idea of everything we do. Thank you very much, engineer. You kept with your time. It's okay. We are just running 8 minutes late, so these minutes you give us are very well needed. So thank you very much for your presentation. And now we are going to introduce engineer Paola Clayton-Smith. She is the secretary of the International Technical Committee 2.2 of Rural transitability, the roadworthiness, and she's going to talk about the financing of rural roads in the case of the UK. So, Engineer Paula Clayton, you have the floor.
Hello, how are you doing? It's good afternoon for you, or good evening, I should say.
It's good evening for me, thank you very much. I don't seem to be able to share screens at the moment. My screen's been, host has disabled it.
Sí, vamos a...
Thank you.
Ahí está, solucionado. Bueno. Adelante, ingeniera, por favor. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Good evening from the UK, and thank you very much for having me as your one of your speakers. I'm going to talk about, first of all, the different types of municipal authority structure in the United Kingdom, and then how that is funded, because all of that has an incredible amount of importance on how rural roads are now managed in the UK. So in the UK, the highways or the delivery of roads and highways is very, very complicated. We have different regions of the countries that have a large number of municipal authorities. So overall, we have over 305, 775 kilometres of roads in England that I'm going to focus on for this presentation. So within England, you have both strategic roads, which are your motorways, as they're described here. Then we have what are classed as combined authorities. And then we have large councils, and then we have smaller urban councils, which means that we've got quite an interesting mix of funding. So from a local authority perspective, we spend over £106.4 billion on public service, but only 7.4% goes towards transport. And of that 7.4%, you can see from this slide here, quite a large proportion is rural roads, but most of the funding tends to go towards the more urban areas, which creates a very interesting dimension for councils in the UK. So in 2016, there was a major change for highways authorities, and this was really important for rural roads, because what the government did was it introduced not just the traditional road classification, which you see around the world, but they also introduced a new guidance which asked councils to look at a risk-based approach. So every road, regardless of its road classification, must be classified according to its risk. Now that risk could be at different things. And what I've done here is I've given you a list of the sorts of things that councils will look at. So they will look at whether the hierarchy of their roads is a resilient network. So they will portion out parts of the road that they need to spend more money that might be more important during extreme weather and other major incidents. Then there will be the winter network, which again, they will assess over the top of their networks, flooding, critical highway maintenance, maintenance hierarchies, and a social network. So you can see this creates a whole new level of layer that local authorities don't just look at from an urban perspective, but that they have to look at from a rural perspective. That means if you take, for example, the government funding plus the risk-based hierarchy, then the councils need to assess in their rural areas a number of other different aspects. So it might be farming communities, it might be vulnerable structures, it might be very sparse and very rural communities, particularly in the north of England. And then they mix all of that together, and then using geographical information systems asset management plans and life cycle modelling, and then data which they're obtaining from laser-borne surveys, from drone surveys, from different types of surveys, structure surveys. And then they use all of that information, which actually creates an individual layer of how each council spends its rural maintenance budget in England particularly. So for example, just to give you some specific examples, Oxfordshire County Council, in that part of the country, their politicians have decided that everything that the local authority does must be around net zero. So everything in that rural assessment has to be net zero focused. Whereas in Lancashire, that is a very different sort of thing. What they do is they assess, because they can't surface all of the roads, because Lancashire is such a big area, they will look at specific roads and really give those a hierarchy over all of the others. So a village might have 5 roads that go in it, but they will apportion their rural maintenance to perhaps 2, which have the highest levels of traffic, albeit that that traffic is very small in comparison with urban. And then another interesting example in North Yorkshire, which is one of the largest local authority areas in England, they have looked at safety as their priority. And in some parts of the county, they have actually changed their road surface because of a number of accidents with horses and their shoes on the road. So you can see just from these examples so far, how different it can be for how those smaller authorities, or how those authorities will allocate their rural funding. And then Blackburn with Darwin is a really interesting example of being a very, very, very urban industrialized town, but actually part of it has a rural area. So it has to really manage its budgets quite effectively because they're trying to increase the impact of road infrastructure maintenance that is really fighting against a town which is almost 80–90% urban, and then really, really rural areas. So I think what I want to do is give you an understanding that in England, certainly, we have a higher level of government funding. The councils are then required to apply a risk-based hierarchy, and the funding they as a local authority would dedicate. And then on top of that, create even more of a layer, which looks at maybe the farming area, it might be geology. So in Cumbria, in north of England, there are mountainous areas. In Lancashire, there are roads which are subject to flooding and roads that have been built on traditional reed areas. So it means that whilst it's incredibly complex, the financing of rural roads in England, it does mean that each council, with their politicians, with their asset management plans and with their life cycle modelling, can determine what's best for them. So thank you for your attention. I know that was a very quick tour of how rural roads are financed in England. But again, I'll be available for questions later on. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, ingeniera Paula. Gracias también por ceñirse al tiempo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for covering this on time. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, ingeniera, por su presentación.
Thank you, engineer, for your presentation. And now we're going to give the floor to engineer Carlos Navarro from Argentina. He has been working in the province of Chaco in road, the road administration for more than 30 years. He has participated in many conferences that have to do with roads in Argentina and abroad, and he works in rural roads in different provinces in Argentina. He has been a speaker for the Federation of Road Administration Workers, and you have the floor now. Good afternoon.
Se ve perfectamente.
Can you see it? Can you see my presentation? First of all, this is a table of contents of my presentation. I'm going to talk about the geographical situation of the road network in Chaco, a brief historical overview, how they work, how do we do an assessment of the economic resource and the rural network, the income from the revenue of these consortiums, the cost of maintenance, and some photograph to show the condition of the states and of the roads and what type of roads we have. And finally, I would like to talk about the Association of Road Consortiums in the province of Chaco. The province of Chaco, you can see it in dark blue. We are 1,000 kilometers from Buenos Aires. We are closer to Paraguay. We have a population of approximately 1.2 million inhabitants, according to the census done more than 10 years ago, because then we don't have the data from the new census that we did last month. And in this map, you could see all the blue spots. You can see in the blue spot the location of the road consortiums, road administration consortiums in the different jurisdictions in the country. Today, there are 102 road administration consortiums, and they are in charge of maintaining 28,680 kilometers of roads, and they have a concession of almost 27,000 kilometers. This difference in kilometers is that in addition to the tertiary road network, they also are in charge of the maintenance of the secondary road network under the jurisdiction of the provincial road administration. In the whole province, we have 33,200 kilometers. We have 2,100 paved roads and 31,000 kilometers of dirt roads and almost 600 kilometers of improved roads. If you can see in the map what is in red, is national jurisdiction, is the national road network, and in dark orange would be the provincial road network. And these solid orange that you see there as the network of local roads maintained by the consortiums, which is the productive area of the province. So these road maintenance consortiums existed before, but they did not have a specific law that would grant funding to them, financing, or that determine who would be part of these consortiums. So in '83, they stopped doing their job. They did not do any maintenance, so it was impossible to go through these roads. So in '87, we had a meeting with all the authorities of the province, and we thought about passing a law that would enable us to provide resources to these consortiums and to determine who is in charge of providing maintenance to these rural roads with no political affiliation whatsoever. So there would be no conflicts between different political parties or incumbent governments. So in 1990, we had Law 3565 that created the road administration or road maintenance consortiums in the province of Chaco and provides special financing for these consortiums, and it clearly determines who are the people that can be part of these consortiums. In 1991, there was a decree that gave way to the creation of these consortiums. Throughout time, there were some modifications and amendments to the law, but there are the two main ones. Was one that said that in addition to provide maintenance to the tertiary and secondary road networks, and province, they can also do some water system or water infrastructure maintenance in the province, because in the case of a drought emergency. And then another amendment also modified the initial law and also allocated some of the resources to the provincial road administration. Road consortiums are non-for-profit organizations that are made up of different neighbors of the location of the municipality that get together in order to provide maintenance to roads they are interested in and they can do public or private hiring or contracts in order to provide maintenance. And their goal is to construct, to build, and to provide maintenance to any local road or tertiary or secondary road network. How they are created? First of all, you need to have 7 people from that rural area that are interested in provide maintenance to the road or where a road needs to be built. These 7 people have to submit the documentation required to open this consortium. This means that they have to have 25 members, and which is the road network they want to provide maintenance to, or they want to build. So the provincial road administration does evaluation to see whether it is right, if the people is the right people to form the consortium. And then finally, they grant the authorization for the creation of the consortium. So first we have the community. The community submits the request to the provincial road administration. Then they go to talk to the neighbors to explain how this consortium works. They create a commission, and once the commission is approved by the provincial road administration, the authorities of the consortium are appointed. Once this is okay, it goes to a different agency in the government of the province that regulates social civil associations. And once the rules of agreements and the bylaws of this consortium is approved, the road consortium is created. And when it is created and organized, they have to have 1 president, 1 vice president, 1 secretary, 1 treasurer, 4 voting members, 3 understanding members, and some other people. So these consortium are made of members, active members, that should be people over 18 years old, that they have to be the owners of a plot of land in the area where the consortium is going to be created. And they have the voice and voting power in the assemblies. Then we have some representation members, representative members that are representatives from the municipality and from the area of the consortium. So the municipality where the consortium is created should be involved also. And so there's a member there that has also voting power. And then we have some other members that do not have voting power, but are people that require the road for their activities, policemen, teachers, or some stores, business owners. They can make their contributions on the assembly, but they don't have voting powers. So how do these consortiums work? They work based on a bylaws that is approved in the assembly, and then the provincial road administration controls all the different activities of these consortium. Then they have some ordinary or extraordinary assemblies, and the executive committee also have periodical meetings, and these consortiums have external controls through the province, through different departments of the road administration of the province. So the consortium has to submit all the documentation that is generated to this department. And this department within the provincial road administration have expert people or technicians that are in charge of following up and controlling these consortiums. There's also external audits because the consortium is in charge of managing public funds. And so they need to be audited. And so also there's some other agencies from the province that should control these consortiums, including the Argentine IRS. And so I'm running out of time, so I would just tell you that the funds received by the consortiums come from the some taxes, and 3% goes to the provincial road fund, and then 7% for a local road network fund. And then you can see how this money is distributed. Here we have a table of the revenue obtained by the law, and you can see the money, it's almost 2 billion pesos or dollars, and it's approximately $48 per kilometer, which is expected to be collected for this year. And here you can see the revenues in dollars. You can see some ups and downs, sometimes because of droughts or because of the pandemic. This is the road network, and when the law was passed, there were 9,600 kilometers, and today we have 26,000 kilometers involved. Resources are divided into for two different purposes from the funds A and B. Fund A is distributed taking into account different indexes. We take into account the geographical location, the type of soil, the type of payment or not payment that we have in the roads. Those who are in lowlands receive more money than those that are located in highlands. The consortium also have some agreements with the road administration for maintenance or for different construction works, such as gutters or culverts or anything that should be done in the roads. And sometimes they also have some preservation agreements where the provincial road administration also provides some of the funds, some of the more heavy machinery, and the employees and the staff are hired by the consortium. Here you can see some how some of the funds are allocated. In this case, we provide almost $23 per kilometers. We have three types of roads, whether they are on highlands, lowlands, or improved um, road, and each consortium is obliged to maintain or provide maintenance to the road according to the classification of the roads in their area. So each consortium receives funds from Fund A, that comes from revenue, and then from some other origins. You can see the costs or the expenses of these consortiums in salaries and insurance, bank costs, employees, etc. So something happened, and I stopped sharing. I don't know why, but I stopped sharing. Yeah, I don't know what happened, and I stopped sharing my screen. So let's go forward to where I was before. So let's see. So finally, which are the unit or operating unit costs in dollars for the construction, for reconstruction of roads, maintenance of the road safers, braking costs, weed cutting, roads costs, etc. Can you hear me? Yeah, we can hear you. These are the type of machineries we were able to acquire. And all those years, over 1,000 pieces of equipment. And these are the ones we are going to acquire this year for over $1 million. These are the historical pieces of equipment we had before the law, and these are the new machines that we have now, very modern. We have some bulldozers and some other type of machines. You can see here the condition of the local or rural roads and the province of Chaco. This is a gravel road that was constructed by the consortium. This is another one with some rock material. And this is about the association of the road consortiums. This association is 10 people, and they are the ones who have dealings, for example, do negotiations to purchase new equipment and etc. Here we can see how the other fund B, is used to purchase equipment for constructing or building some headquarters, for maintenance, for some road emergencies. And this is a summary of all that we have achieved throughout this 20-something, 30 years of this law that created road consortiums. And that's it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, engineer, for your great presentation. We are a little bit behind. No, it's just 8 minutes late. So now I will ask, please, engineer, stop sharing your screen, and then I'm going to introduce the next session.
Okay, we are going to open the Q&A session, which is going to be moderated by Engineer Hugo Miranda from the Paraguayan Association of Roads. Hugo, welcome you to this space. Thank you, Andrea. And I want to say hello to all of the excellent presenters in this seminar, in this session. especially Christian Dunkerley. I want to thank him for his opening words, and a special hello to all of our colleagues because of the International Day of Women Engineers. So I want to especially congratulate our lady colleagues. To start the Q&A, I want to um, relay the first question to Engineer Aguayo from Ruben Lobos. The question is, in the Global Competitiveness Index that is published by the Economic World Forum regarding the indicators of quality, road quality, uh, we are in position 24, which is the best Latin American country. So what corresponds to rural roads within the network in order to be in such a good position? This is to Engineer Aguayo. Can you hear me? Yes. I have a bad cold. I'm sorry. So I may cough in the middle. That position that is mentioned there is due to several factors. One has to do with basic roads, but where you have more traffic, there's uh, better perception, but 3,000 kilometers out of our network have been licensed to different operators. So we have a lot of traffic going on those roads that have a certain impression on how the road network looks like. Uh, Apart from that, we need to preserve and improve the rest of the network. And that's why we have this global or comprehensive improvement network with around 200 contracts around the country. And that means that the rest of the network is in good condition. We've had almost 80,000 kilometers done in rural roads. For example, in the Valparaiso area, we have covered almost 95% of the network, including basic roads. So wherever you go in Valparaiso, you have good roads. Uh, so if you ask me for a number and we talk about basic roads, we are around 21%. So if that's the metrics, I would assign 21% of responsibility out of that metric that you mentioned to basic roads. Thank you, engineer. Next question is for Engineer Dunkerley from Soliman Usiman. What's your point of view regarding funding of road projects or the PPP sort of funding? Do you have this private-public funding in Latin America? Does that exist? Yes. Hello, Hugo. Thank you for the question. Um, I do have some experience in different operations involving private public participation and PPP agreements. One of the main problems in those operations has to do with traffic volume, because many times there's a toll system to collect money, and generally the roads involving participation of the private sector, if you take into account traffic levels, if that's the only source of funding, that would involve big difficulties to attract public funds in this type of road. In those places where this scheme has been used, many times, if they want private participation, it involves more risk and it involves more funding that is needed. To give you an example, in one of the few areas where this happened in Latin America is in Uruguay. Uruguay is funding some of the road networks not through PPPs and not for trunk roads, but for secondary or tertiary roads. And what the state has done is to um, assume the responsibility for a stream of future payments where private parties contribute the money and then they get reimbursement, but those reimbursements are not based on traffic volume. So to answer your question, this is a little difficult, and where I've seen it is there's participation from private parties in the execution, but the state also assumes responsibility in funding and in providing the resources to conduct the works. Thank you, Engineer Dunkerley. Next question is for Paula Clayton Smith from the UK, and it's this. Considering their small vulnerability of rural roads in view of weather events, how has climate change affected rural roads in the UK?
Okay, it's varied in a number of different ways. So in the north of the country, we've had roads wash away from large storms. So what's happened is government has given out specific reparation funding to repair those roads to withstand future flooding. But what we're also seeing is micro effects of climate change where there is mass edge deterioration in rural networks, but also where some rural areas the land is drying out. That is also creating increased geostructure failure, which many councils are having to rethink about the types of materials they might use in those areas.
Muchas gracias, ingeniera.
Thank you, Paula. Next question is for Engineer Navarro from the province of Chaco in Argentina. What's the evaluation regarding the success of maintenance through these consortiums? What aspects could be improved to optimize this strategy? Well, it's specific funding. It cannot be used for something else. And the law says that the collection is on a daily basis because it's an additional tax. But in order not to do the transfers every day, there's transfers twice a month, and that goes to a specific account in the provincial road administration, and that administration then transfers the money to the consortiums. So the provincial state cannot use this money for something else. That's the main strength of this system. And then the second advantage is that really the maintenance is done by the users of that road. So they are stakeholders that are very much interested in having good roads. So they contribute the money and they try to save as much as possible, making sure that the roads are maintained in good condition. And something that I did not mention is that all of the members of the board are ad honorem. They don't receive any money for this service. What could be done to improve this system? Well, maybe we need more technology in these consortiums for enhancement of natural pathways so that they are made into permanent roads. And since they are traffic worthy, they should be considered rural roads. We have another question for Engineer Aguayo from Chile. Ever Rodriguez says, what are the 3 elements or actions that the Ministry of Public Works in Chile has conducted in order to make politicians understand that it is indispensable to make this program last? Because many times when there's a change in the administration, some programs are discontinued. Well, I would say that there was no specific action in order to achieve that. Up to now, each new administration has shown a desire to um, put this among the commitments that they have for their period. The situation in the past was that a certain administration would make the roads, but when they saw the results, the mayor of the next municipality wanted to have improvement in their own roads, regardless of the political party that was in office. So everybody wanted these basic rural roads to be improved. So each administration would make a point of improving roads for the rural communities or the local communities. So at some point, you did not need to go to the politicians to ask for continuity of the programs, but rather they wanted to continue the programs because of the good results that they saw. Okay, thank you, engineer. Those are the questions that we had for this Q&A. Now, Andrea, I'll give you the floor again. Thank you, Engineer Miranda, for moderating the Q&A, and thank you to the presenters for their very interesting presentations. This is really important to discuss our topic for today because all of us deal with funding. And so now I'm going to propose a 5-minute break so that we come back and resume and stay on time with the agenda. When we come back, we're going to have a roundtable for funding with Engineer Facundo Salinas from Paraguay, from the Treasury in Paraguay, Engineer Aguayo from Chile, Engineer Héctor Varela from the Latin American Development Bank, Engineer Navarro, who was with us in this first session also, Engineer Soliman Osiman from the 2.2 Committee of PIARC, Engineer Caldo, and we are going to have Engineer Fabio Riveros as the moderator from the Public Works Ministry. And after that, we're going to have our closing session from Paraguay by the Vice President of the Road Association in Paraguay, Engineer Guillermo Mas. So it's 2:54 in Paraguay. We are going to resume at 3 p.m. Paraguayan time sharp. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, estamos de nuevo de regreso.
Good afternoon. We are back now to resume our session. Ingeniero Fabio Riveros, you have the floor. Good afternoon, everybody. It is a pleasure to have all these distinguished participants in this roundtable. I would like to welcome Facundo Salinas, Osvaldo Aguayo, Héctor Varela, Alejandra Caldo, and everybody. Really, it's a pleasure to share with you this session in this seminar. So many times I have to very friendly discuss with Facundo Fanny Salinas how we are going to fund and finance all the requirements we have for rural roads. So let's start with this discussion. So thank you very much for your presence here, and we thank all the participants in this roundtable, Engineer Alejandro Caldo and Licenciado Facundo Salinas. Thank you very much for being here. So I would like to tell you about the dynamic of this session, this Q&A or roundtable session.
Esto va a durar 1 hora y media.
This is going to last for 1.5 hours. So first, each one of you will have 3 minutes to make an initial presentation, and after that, we can receive questions from the audience, and each of you can answer each of the questions. If your answers last more than 2 minutes, so please, we ask you, if your answer is going to be longer than 2 minutes, so we will give you the contact data of the speakers, of the members, so you can keep on contacting them via email, and they can elaborate on their answer via email, for example. So I would like to introduce Engineer Alejandro Caldo. She is here with us today. She's a specialist in transports from the IDB in the Paraguay office in June 2018. He worked before 6 years as a consultant in the transport department of the IDB in Washington and in the Panama office, and he worked for 10 years in the province of Córdoba in Argentina. She has experts on all programs financed and funded by the IDB and the World Bank. She studied in the University of Córdoba. She has a master on business administrations and a micromaster in logistics from the Institute of Technology. And welcome, Engineer Caldo. Good afternoon. Thank you, Andrea, and all the members and the panel members. It is a pleasure to be here sharing this space, and I would like to say that from the IDB, in the IDB, we believe that infrastructure and economic growth are intertwined, and that the goal are to improve the quality of life of the population. From the IDB, we provide support to the countries in the regions to close their gaps in infrastructure and to be able to achieve sustainable economic recovery as the 2025 vision from the IDB Bank establishes. And we've seen that Paraguay has been doing a great job trying to close these gaps, increasing capital expenses over the last years. The gaps are there still, and to close those gaps, it's a challenge for Paraguay and for the other countries in the region in a context where the economic situation has been deteriorated and investment have decreased because of the economic crisis brought about by the COVID pandemic. So we believe that rural roads have a very important social and strategic role, because they are the connections of these rural areas to the main roads and to the main consumption centers. And more importantly, they provide access to the population to basic services. And so these road programs have a double role: to improve the quality of life of the rural population and also to improve the competitiveness and the productivity of these areas in a country. These rural roads are very important for a country infrastructure. Over 76% of the total rural roads, rural road network are rural roads, dirt roads with no runoff and drainage systems. And we know that during rainy seasons, there's no roadworthiness, and this is a hindrance both for the populations and the transports. And we have been supporting the government of Paraguay for many years. We have so far approved 5 rural roads or local roads operations for $330 million from the ITB, but also we have leveraged resources from other multilateral agencies and local resources by the government for over $500 million. And we currently have 2 programs under execution out of those five. And what is important is that these programs are executing works in many of the districts of the country, so we can see the high geographical presence of these programs. And these programs have as goals to improve rural roads or municipal or local roads, the replacement of wood bridges by reinforced concrete bridges. And also this includes some engineering components so that the government of Paraguay can have a bank of investment for future investments and operations. We have over 3,000 kilometers of improved and enhanced roads, over 6,000 linear meters of reinforced concrete bridges, and over 19,000 kilometers of improved and enhanced roads. These interventions also, of course, are done in the rural areas of the country where we have the highest levels of poverty and abject and extreme poverty. And so the goals of these programs is to help the government of Paraguay to fight against poverty and extreme poverty. Once again, I would like to manifest the interest of the IDB of continuing providing this type of support. We believe in these programs, and this is aligned to the idea of helping to the sustainable and inclusive economic recovery of these regions. Thank you very much, Alejandra. Very clear explanations. Now I will give the floor to Fabio Riveros. So please, can you unmute yourself, please? Junior Riveros, and I will give the floor. So I think that Alejandra's explanations have been very clear, and this kind of continues what we have been discussing in the previous sessions, and so it will be very interesting once again to describe the different modalities or the different options we have in our countries in order to fund roads, rural roads. I don't know where Facundo, you have some contribution to make here, because of course we know that resources are always scarce, and what are the options we have as regards the improvement or enhancement of rural roads? I'm not seeing Facundo. Yeah. Sorry, I see you. Yeah. Welcome. First of all, I would like to introduce you briefly so the audience can know you. Licenciado Facundo Salinas has graduated from the Catholic University as a lawyer in 2002, has an MBA in law by Barcelona University in 2007, and he also have a diploma in PPPs by the Monterrey Institute in Mexico in 2014. He also participated and completed the PPP program in infrastructure in RESUR 2014, and an intensive graduate course on constitutional law issues in the School of Law from the University of Buenos Aires. And he also has some graduate course on procedural law in the University of Buenos Aires. He has made several publications in legal journals. So welcome, Ingeniero Facundo. Now you have the floor. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. As Fabio, Engineer Fabio said, resources are always scarce in economy. What we have to do is try to see how to allocate those scarce resources to the different needs that are always larger than the resources. So gaps are like those unattainable wishes or desires. And so the question is how we can generate enough resources to close this gap, at least if we want to close that gap in a reasonable time during our lifetime, for example. But the question is, how can we better allocate those resources? And this is the key issue today, the current situation. Clearly, where all economies in different countries, because of internal regions or internal decisions made, for example, in the case of Paraguay, because of the pandemic, this meant the increase in the public debt. And this increase, of course, in turn, the deficit. Some also decisions made in order to stimulate consumption and loans and credits, and also external shocks. We had several of these in Paraguay. We have a drought, and this was not expected by anybody. And since we are an agricultural exported country, this, of course, was a great impact, not just because of the loss of soybean and beef and meat that were greatly impacted by the drought, but also electricity generation and production, because Paraguay is an exporter of electricity both to Brazil and Argentina, and the drought had an impact on water flow, and so we could export less electricity, and our revenues were reduced because of that. And since we also export fuels, we also were greatly impacted by all the consequences of the Ukraine war, with increase in the price of fuels, and has a great impact on us, of course. So on the one hand, our expectations for the year that was going to be a recovery year is not such. Our economy, at least as what the IMF and the central bank said, we are not going to drop, we are going to have just a 0.2% of growth. And since we are going to have lower revenues, and the economy minister has to adjust expenses in order to control the deficit that grew up to 6% of the GDP during the pandemic, and then was adjusted to 3.6 or 7. So the idea is to reduce it even more. And the problem here is, where do you make the adjustments? And unfortunately, given the budgetary and spending structure of Paraguay, which is not always efficient, you have to make adjustments in infrastructure expenses, and not just discriminated between main roads or local roads, wherever we need to adjust in current expenses and salaries. But you cannot adjust on current expenses. You have to protect healthcare spending. And so, given this current situation with the inflation rising all over the world. In the short term, I'm not expecting an increase in taxes in the short term, especially if we have a global recession, as has been discussed in the world, not just in the case of Paraguay, but both the Federal Reserve is expecting some kind of recession because the Fed increases interest rates. The UK Central Bank also, Christine Lagarde, said the same about the European Central Bank. The CEO of JP Morgan was talking about an inflationary storm in the US. So all these will gradually increase interest rates. So given this situation, we are not thinking about tax reform, but essentially there should be some reduction in investment spending. And there, then it's now we have to think about how to generate more resources. And with the resources we already have, how we can make adjustments, or how are we going to allocate those resources? How are we going to prioritize that spending? So if I think about the spending structure of the public work ministry, or if I focus on the investment in local roads, if I look at the budget for all public investment in Paraguay, almost 80% is allocated to public debt. And if I look at the public work budget and I focus on local roads, this is 100% public debt, maybe with multilateral organizations, etc. But basically, what we are seeing now is that we will continue getting finance through debt, to indebtedness in the case of local roads for sure. And the great issue will be how, if I had no financial profitability, I need to generate more fiscal space, more fiscal resources. So the issue here is, I stop everything, or I prioritize my spending or my investment in, for example, the main roads that can generate their own resources and they can self-finance themselves, and I can free some other resources in order to provide maintenance to local roads. So indebtedness today in the bonds market is a little bit complicated. So I think that we will continue with multilateral agencies. And the idea is the same. Main roads, which are those with a highly average of traffic, should be more efficient, should be made more efficient. If you are hearing some noises outside, it's because we are in the Ministry of Finance and we always have some protests or demonstrations outside. So if I can make my main roads profitable, or that they can self-generate their resources, I can allocate my other resources to the local roads, because I cannot have a toll booth in a rural dirt road, but we can have them on the main roads. And I think that that would be the direction of the discussion in the future.
It's really a challenge for everyone. And we have engineer Carlos Navarro from Argentina, who already mentioned in the previous session how they are funding maintenance. And I don't know, Engineer Navarro, if you could please review how these resources are being generated, uh, uh, to see if that may be an interesting idea, which was not on my menu. So if you could go back to what you explained about what you're doing. Well, we had the same difficulties. We had to face the same problems because we had no resources. This started during a crisis in Argentina, because through the road administration, we would allocate resources for road maintenance, but because of the crisis, the production sector required these ways of funding. So that's how we came up with a law to establish a specific fund from uh, provincial tax revenue. Uh, an additional 10% was added to be allocated to road maintenance, and it was a significant fund. And so in 2012, that extra tax rate was lowered, and money was allocated to the provincial road administration, and they came up with the consortiums, which was a way to allocate the excess money that they had. And now with the budget that they have, it's never too much because we have good roads, but uh, these roads, many of these roads are natural roads or natural trails. And then since the producers need to use those roads, they need to be paved or they need to be into permanent roads so as to reach the ports in order to export the goods. So as I said, the roads nowadays are doing good, are doing well. When there is a lot of rain, we start having problems, but they are rehabilitated immediately. And approval of the consortium law was unanimous. All of the political parties approved that law for the creation of the consortiums. And when 10% of the tax revenue was devoted to the road administration, that was also unanimous. So when people see that the money goes to the intended recipients, it's not a problem to allocate that money for a specific goal. Thank you very much. That was great to hear. It's very interesting to hear about uh, your option, which is something that we need to analyze to see if we can use this type of funding scheme to address the requirements that we have, specifically for rural roads. I think, on the other hand, that one of the topics that needs to be analyzed, and I would like to hear the experiences from other countries, is that every time we need to justify investment in rural roads, we find the obstacle of the fact that they have low traffic. So this is kind of a vicious circle that we keep seeing, because the roads may be in critical conditions, so there's slow traffic, and since there's slow traffic, it's not attractive enough and it's complex to justify an investment for enhancement of those roads. So I would like to hear from you how you are dealing with this from the perspective of the analysis, I mean, feasibility analysis to improve rural roads.
Buenas
Sí,
tardes.
adelante.
Hello,
Buenas
good
tardes.
afternoon, everybody. I'm Héctor Varela from the Latin America Development Bank. I don't know if I was introduced or I need to introduce myself. Andrea, can you introduce our colleague here? Yes, of course, engineer. I'm going to introduce you. Welcome. Engineer Héctor Varela.
Sí, perfecto.
Can you hear me? Yes. Héctor Varela is a civil engineer from the Polytechnic University of Madrid. He has a master's in roads and a master's in administration of infrastructure and public services. He is a member of CAF or the Latin American Development Bank, and he works on physical infrastructure and digital transformation, and he supports the knowledge management in his sector. Engineer Varela was a member of the committee planning and funding many infrastructures and roads, and he also provides consulting services in the coordination of cross-functional teams for high-speed trains and highways, as well as roads. Engineer Varela, welcome, and you have the floor. Okay, thank you, Andrea. Can you hear me? Yes. I don't know if you want to share a screen or something. No, it's not necessary. First of all, I would like to congratulate you for this seminar. I think it is necessary and it's a very timely event because Paraguay is below the regional average regarding the rural network, and Paraguay has the least favorable indicators in the region. So despite the effort that the governments in the region have been doing to improve the situation, and the administrations of Paraguay have been doing, their network of local roads shows that only 3% are paved to a certain degree. Only a few kilometers have asphalt and some other stone treatments for around 2,000 kilometers. So I think it is very timely to have this seminar organized by Paraguay. From the Latin American Development Bank, we are very much interested in participating and hearing about the cases. I think it is a timely event because of the need for economic recovery after the COVID crisis. Many of our countries are facing the same challenges. The world economy, as Facundo Solano mentioned, is facing these challenges. So we need to remind everybody that the development of the rural roads is an investment that generates the most jobs for each dollar that is invested. So it has a high capacity to generate jobs. And apart from generating jobs for uh, non-qualified labor. And it also gives opportunities to people who are in the rural environment who have fewer opportunities. I think it is very important to promote the um, the focus on efficient modes. Right now, I'm in Paraguay. I was visiting the ministry a few days ago, and I saw a demonstration uh, protesting in a small community, and they were demanding for a technique that maybe exceeded what they needed, but it's interested in these seminars to promote a more efficient vision of rural road management. Many of the roads that we are working on, uh, we see demands asking for asphalt layers in rural roads, but it's not justified by the traffic volume. But it's true that people are demanding this. So maybe we need to explain or teach to users about more cost-effective techniques, which will enable us to develop many more kilometers of rural roads. I think it is very interesting to see presentations like Engineer Navarro's presentation regarding management and methods to maintain the rural network. And I think it is very important to take a look at these methods for value capture that enable us to do road management through fiscal tools or through revenue capture when you have the possibility to use those roads 365 days a year, especially in agricultural production areas. And I think, or I would like to emphasize the skills that, or the tools that are needed for this type of development, which is techniques and technologies that enable us to have cost-effective investment. So thank you very much for inviting me, for having me, and I'm open to questions. If I may, I would like to make a comment here regarding what the colleague from Paraguay said. We were able to improve tertiary roads with granular materials or clay or ionic techniques. But the point here is having the resources, because I was talking about Fund B. I went through a little quickly, but the results go to the consortium, but 30% stays in an account for new consortiums or to foster works in the rural network. So in Chaco, for example, we have quarries, and we hire the trucks to transport the stones that are used for enhancement of roads depending on the needs, uh, especially in trunk roads, especially the ones that are used to go to school, and small villages in Chaco where you have a number of people, let's say 40, 50, 100 families, small villages, where we build permanent access so that they can get to provincial or national roads using these funds that are managed by the consortiums. That's what I wanted to explain. Thank you, engineer. Engineer Fabio Rebrero, you have the floor. Sorry for the interruption. I wanted to ask Mr. Navarro. I don't know if I missed this part, but where do the resources come from that you're using in the way that you just explained? Well, this fund is an additional tax revenue from like a VAT tax that the province collects, and it goes to a specific fund, and it's divided into 70-30, but as from 2012, it's not 10%, it's, sorry, out of that 10%, it's divided 70-30, but it's specific. It has to be used for road maintenance. In some other governments, there were withdrawals for use in other or to be allocated to other uses, but that was taken to the courts, and the officials were accountable for the use of these resources, and these resources are used for roads exclusively. Engineer Riveros, we have a question from Fernando Paniagua for you. I'm giving you the questions. Another question from Marruecos, from Morocco. Mr. Tachar from Morocco. I'm sending you the questions to you as a moderator. Okay, that's correct. So the question is by Engineer Paniagua, says, given the fact that in Paraguay we pay tolls that are around $0.7 for each 100 kilometers, how much are people paying in Chile or the UK, Argentina, in connection with paved roads? And also regarding unpaved roads, another question is, how much is the average in cost of maintenance per kilometer in dollars? Can you give me any reference? He's asking how much is maintenance per kilometer in unpaved roads.
You can answer me. Well, I can answer as regards the last question, how much is per dollars in kilometers, how much dollars per kilometer for maintenance? It's approximately $500 kilometers for the whole period. It means that we have a 18-month contracts, 6 months for assessment, and a year of maintenance, and in average, the cost per kilometer is $5,000. Alejandra, those $5,000 is per year. It's in average for 18 months. If we consider the available budget, 321,000 kilometers, in average, maybe $5,000 per 18 months, with 6 months of startup and preparations and 12 months of routine maintenance. As regards tolls, I think that we are just kind of confusing things here. What I can tell you, I don't know if there's anybody from Chile here, but Chile's toll is much more expensive than ours, but also the levels of service are different. So it's not the same highway, double carriageway, motorway with a rural road, and it's not the same federal countries such as a country as ours. Our colleague from the province of Chaco described a provincial fund that is taken from sales taxes. But in Paraguay, we know that there are certain type of fiscal laziness by our governments because they receive something, I don't know, but they did not generate the enough resources to provide maintenance to the local network. If I look to local roads maintenance, it's 100% public debt. So the question is, am I going to make adjustments to the national rate or toll to get some resources for the maintenance of the roads, or I generate any other resource? But given all the issues we are having with the price of fuel now, I don't think it's going to be well received by the population. But what I'm sure is that specific funds are useful to provide, to give confidence to the people involved and local networks. I don't know if we have people here from the UK. For example, I have never seen a toll booth in the UK or a toll payment in the UK, but of course, fiscal pressure in the UK is much larger than us. So I don't know if I'm explaining myself. I think we have a colleague from Chile. Yeah, me. As regards Chile, as I said in my presentation, we had a road revolution, as we called it in 95 from 95 to 2005, with concessions, and the main road network was turned into highway, semi-highway, motorway, and all of that is private. So the cost of toll is $5 per 100 kilometers. This seems to be very high, but the level of service is higher also. And every 50 kilometers, you have restrooms, resting areas, some assistance for some emergencies. So the fact that we decided to have these 3,000 kilometers granted in concessions freed some resources that enable us to provide maintenance, to do preservation, and then in our second road revolution for basic roads, we were able to do everything I have explained in my presentation. But as to preservation costs, I'm not sure because things have changed a lot. But considering Alejandra's figures for $5,000 for 18-month agreement, we have overall or global preservation agreements for 500,000 for 500 kilometers for some years with routing maintenance. It's quite good. It's not the optimal situation, but if they can maintain the roads in a good conditions, it's useful for us. So in summary, concessions provide a good service. The toll is higher. All tolls, toll-operated highways are private, and the savings in investment in this case now is used for preservation of the network, and also some of that money that now is saved goes to basic roads or to local roads. This is the situation in Chile. I would like to tell something as regards our costs and rural roads for maintenance. I showed it in my presentation. The annual cost is about $580 per kilometers, per year. Remember that the only person collecting a salary or receiving a salary is the all the workers that are operating the machines, but all the members of the consortium do not receive any compensation for their position.
Estás en silencio, Fabio.
You are muted, Fabio. Sorry. My connection was unstable. So somebody was telling me something. I was telling you that you were muted. So our colleague from UK said that they do have tolls, but just in large bridges or very important highways. But that's also a debate in the UK also. So we are just here discussing where do resources come from. Of course, nobody discussed the fact that the roads are important. Okay, it's no sense to discuss this. So the question is, where am I going to get my resources from? And we already know that resources are scarce. So how we can obtain them and allocate them efficiently. So, for example, from what I have heard, the province of Chaco look for a new way of doing that, but they get 10% from taxes that goes to a fund. And then we have the Chilean example where they just decided to work with the private sector with high tolls, but they use it on the main roads with high traffic. And I think this is the way we have to go or think. You need to free up resources to allocate them for other priorities, because you have a budget now that is just in a big bag and it goes for everything, both local, main, or whatever. So we need to think about the time frame where we are. We have to start with this discussion, I think. Yeah. Totally agree. So I think that what they did in the province of Chaco is to create a tax, a new tax for a very specific objective. And the fact the population knows what's how this money will be allocated. What will be the use of this tax that is collected? So I think that we should discuss something along these lines, how to get resources, how to allocate them to a special fund that can only be used for this goal and not for any other thing. And we need to discuss how to sustain in time the provision of those resources in order to improve our local roads. Perhaps another option may be provide subsidies or maintenance, or provide maintenance by increasing the cost of those main roads with higher traffic averages. We need to think about it. I think that the main challenge here is see how we can outsource the management of main roads to the private sector, and that through that outsourcing, we can even get some resources for the government in order to improve or enhance rural roads. Can I add something, Fabio? Yeah, sure. I think that this about having a specific fund for maintenance, it's very interesting for me. And something that should be go hand in hand with this is the decentralization of the management of local or municipal roads to the local authorities to provide more autonomy and more resources and more technical capacity to those municipalities or communities where the local roads are, and not have everything centralized into the public work ministry. There have been some good experiences with local administrations in Itaipú, Alto Paraná, for example, but when the funding provided by the programs from the multilateral agencies is finished, is over, then you have nothing to continue, and there should be some mechanism so that we can have a fund to provide funds to the different municipalities and authorities to provide maintenance to the roads. Or this is essential, the decentralization of the management of the roads. So to supplement Alejandra's comment, I think that something very important along these lines is training. Proper training for those small agencies or consortiums or companies, training by the ministry, and then to supervise those programs. Some easy things that can be done for those areas. I have to be, I would not say the pessimist, but I have to be the devil's advocate here. I agree on the fact of having a fund, maybe, I don't know, something, but the question of what we have to think is how I'm going to provide funds to this fund. I'm reading in the chat my colleague from Morocco that says that in this time of crisis, it's kind of difficult to create new taxes, to apply new taxes. And I have to agree with him. But if I look at the reality here in Paraguay today, what's the political discussion in Paraguay is to reduce consumption, to reduce the oil price or the fuel price, because we are importers, full importers of fuels. And when you are told that this fund should be selective and sometimes you need to allocate them to transport because transport is more important, is a priority. So it's difficult for me. And then we need to discuss the challenge will be here, how we can generate new resources without increasing taxes, or how can we sell this to the population so it is acceptable. And but once again, the key issue here is from where can we get those resources? I agree on decentralization, for example, but you mean a decentralization of roles, but not of resources. So where are those resources coming from? From the government, or the government will be able to generate resources to allocate to those decentralized agencies, as the government of the province of Chaco did. I'm not sure. So we had experience of royalties. So that's a long way to go yet. and it's not so easy for me how to generate new resources. Given our current situation, I think that we should go to the optimization of the national road network that we already have and see if we have some type of cross subsidy, something like that. So can I say something? We also have some difficulties, but the only ones who complained because of the tax, of the new tax, were the store owners, because they also had to make a contribution. If somebody goes and buy a package of something, they are making a contribution to the rural roads and not to the cities. And so all the inhabitants in the province, regardless of where they live, they have to contribute to the maintenance of the rural roads. That was the only resistance we encountered, the store owners. But when people in the rural areas analyze the operation costs of transport, if you have a rural road in a poor condition, it is much higher. It's a great difference to transport production to paved roads if you have rural roads in poor condition. So they agreed on this new tax because with that they were able to reduce their own operating costs. So these are the things you have to analyze. Of course, there's an additional tax, but if that tax is well used and you have a road that can be used most of the year and the producers or in the rural areas can get with their machineries and get with their inputs and supplies and then can transport their production to the paved roads, it's okay. So the only ones that may not be directly benefited are the people in the urban areas, because store owners would not use those rural roads. But yes, the producers, the agricultural producers, farmers, etc., cattle raisers, whoever. But the only ones that could complain and did complain because of the new tax were urban population. So continuing with Carlos' reasoning, I have been 2 days here traveling along the roads in Paraguay, and we have had a double surface treatment given the load volume or the agricultural production. So I agree on the fact that there should be some way to generate resources as regards an improvement in logistic costs. Because if you improve enhanced roads, you are going to benefit everything related to that road. All the costs of productions are going to be reduced.
That's correct. Now, as a conclusion, I think everybody agrees that regarding methodology and decentralization, there's nothing to discuss. And as Facundo was saying, this is clear, but going back to the experience of the province of Chaco in Argentina, the resources come from taxes. In this case in particular, what this is showing us is that since the resources come from taxes that are protected so that they are used for this purpose exclusively, this is a tax that is accepted by the population in general. And there may be some people who disagree, but in general, the fact that you administer these resources in order to achieve a goal, it makes for those taxes to be more easily acceptable. Something similar to that happened to us in the paved road network that we have in Paraguay. We have different contracts for rehabilitation or enhancement and good service levels. And in those areas, we were able to adjust to a certain degree the cost of tolls, and we didn't see a negative reaction. So when people receive a service in exchange for those taxes that they contribute, then those are accepted. Now, what Facundo is saying is also true. And right now, in the situation that Paraguay is facing with the crisis, we've seen almost 100% of increase in the price of fuels. So this has had a very heavy impact on the community, and it's difficult right now to talk about more taxes. But I don't see any way out other than those options. On the other hand, something else that was also mentioned by Facundo is the fact that the main roads can be managed through private funding who are given operation licenses. So that would give us some leeway so as to be able to enhance the roads through public indebtedness in rural roads, especially. There's also one comment here from the representative from Morocco who is saying that they prioritized rural roads, um, and I think they gave licenses or concessions, and in that way they were able to get funds to work on rural roads over main roads or urban roads. But anyway, the resources need to come from somewhere. So that's the challenge that we are all facing at this point. I wanted to say something. Of course, it is a difficult time to think about investments because we have limited resources. But in my experience in these last 18 years, I've seen how these small roads that are enhanced and end up putting together low traffic networks, they mean a big change in people's lives. And also there are changes in people's lives because of the local development. There's more movement and there are more entrepreneurs or micro entrepreneurs that are very beneficial to the small scale economies of those towns. Maybe it's small scale, but it could benefit the country in the long run. For example, there was a fisherman town, and once we provided access through a road, that became a tourist attraction. So the investment was only for the fishermen at the beginning, but it transformed the whole town, and now they receive tourists. And so you can see how in some other towns that are maybe aboriginal villages, they can also become tourist resorts, offering camping sites that are an attraction for people visiting the area. So, for example, in farming areas, there used to be many potholes, but if you uh, improve the surface, they can transport their produce at lower costs. So I don't see this as expenditure, but there's always a return. Apart from everything that I can say about how this has a positive impact on people's lives, because they can access schools, because in the old days they would have only one bus in the morning and one bus in the afternoon or in the evening, and now they have better connectivity through buses, and they can go to the town in order to get services. So in services, in Chile, sorry, uh, we started from the same uh, point, and John Kennedy used to say, we don't have good roads because we are a rich country, or it's the other way around. We are a rich country because we have good roads. So when the Treasury would tell us, you cannot do this because it's low traffic, okay, well, it's a case of the chicken or the egg. When you improve these basic roads, just the surface, you start seeing more movement, and that brings more local development, which has a positive impact in the life of people. So this is my experience in these last 18 years working on basic roads.
Y
Muchas
Fabio, si
gracias.
puedo
Sí, adelante.
complementar un poquito, bueno, con lo que
Adelante.
decía.
If I may, I would like to say something also. It's your contribution, Osvaldo, is very interesting. And in that sense, in one of the operations that we have no impact evaluation for rural roads in Paraguay. So in one of these operations, we started with the execution of the program, and we considered the baseline. And now that we are ready to measure the impacts in terms of production and poverty reduction, we were able to publish this baseline report that was done in 2018. And in the next few months, we're going to be able to survey the information to measure the impact in Paraguay for this kind of project.
Correcto. Bueno,
That's right.
Alejandra, por tu
Thank you, Alejandra, for your comments.
quisiera agregar un poco
And I would like to add
parte, tal vez
um,
yo creo que debiéramos
some of my thoughts here. I
de
think
alguna
we
manera
should probably
buscar,
start
digamos, algunos
finding or trying to find
fondos o
funds
asignar fondos de lo que
or
anteriormente
reallocate
fue el
funds
Ministerio de Obras
from the ones that
para temas
the Ministry of Public Works receives
de alguna
to do
manera
maintenance, so that
un sector, digamos, de esa o una parte de
one
esos recursos
sector or
esté,
one part of that
realmente
those resources
ya bien blindado
really
para que pueda
are
utilizarse
shielded
con
so that they can
exactitud
be
para lo cual
used
fue previsto
exclusively for the
y
purpose
hacer
that they were intended.
las evaluaciones correspondientes
And we also need
sobre
to conduct evaluation
buen
of the
o
impact
la utilización de esos recursos
that is produced by the good use of those
para lo cual está
resources
previsto, ¿verdad?
that
Entonces,
are allocated to the purpose
esas
intended.
evaluaciones a su vez yo creo
With
que
those
pudiéramos
assessments or
lograr
surveys, we will be able to
justificaciones que realmente
find
nos lleven
justification
a
that
seguir
really
invirtiendo en ese
help
sentido
us
y que podamos ir
continue investing in those areas and that will help grow in the quality of infrastructure in those areas. I think it has to be gradual also, because nowadays we have, as Héctor Varela was saying, with his story about how each of the local rural communities start demanding asphalt now, for example. I think if we were able to somehow be more creative and more efficient to provide roadworthiness without having to use asphalt, we would be able to move forward and have the necessary enhancements. That's what I wanted to say here. I don't know if we have any other participants that want to add something. Well, in our case, we have a long experience and many stories that I can tell you. Chile is quite centralized. So decisions are taken at the ministry level, and that is, or that trickles down to all of the regions. And this program was created, and all of the regions aligned in order to comply with the goals that set thousands of kilometers. And apart from the decision, the centralized decision from the minister, the president was also involved. And this meant that it was possible to involve people. So apart from the ministry decision and the funding, we went to the different regions who also have their own budget for schools, ambulances, and different services, and they saw the benefits of this program, and they devoted resources to this program too. It wasn't a big contribution, but 11% of the program was covered with funds from the different regions who decided to invest in this program. And another important contribution was the contribution from private parties, because their transportation costs was really high, and they realized that it was beneficial to them to agree on how to fund the works with the ministry. And in some cases, the private parties financed the operation completely, because they saw that it was convenient for them to have roads that were in good conditions, and the additional benefit was for people who lived around those roads to have an improvement in their quality of life. So all of these were contributions to our program. And I think that goes hand in hand when the the high level authorities, a minister or the president, conveys the message about working on basic roads. We kept talking about the message of improving basic roads. So the keys to the success were um, the political decision that was made, and also the fact that our country is centralized, which in this case was beneficial to the program. That's my last contribution here. Thank you, Osvaldo. It's an excellent support and excellent contribution on your part. Uh, I don't know if we need to add something. I think we have analyzed a number of situations, and really we got to the conclusion that getting the funds is key to be able to improve the situation of our roads. But something else that I want to highlight here is that it's very important to shield these funds because resources are scarce. And in this case, in particular, improvement of road infrastructure goes hand in hand with improvement in the economy. So we are, for example, I'm part of the public administration, and the people working with me in the ministry, in the treasury, we need to make sure that these resources are allocated correctly. And that is going to provide sustainability to investments in rural roads. So I think that is one of the main conclusions here. On the one hand, we necessarily need to resort to some type of tax revenue to provide funds, but also we need to make a very strong commitment to applying those resources adequately.
Excelente, ingeniero. No sé si me
Excellent. I don't know if everybody can hear me. Yes, Andrea, we can hear you.
Pablo Godoy nos hace un comentario bastante
Pablo
interesante.
Godoy makes a very interesting comment. He says one of the challenges of the local rural roads network is sustainability of investments for the new generation of roads in Paraguay. Uh, Local roads that are paved, and that means an increase in the investment per kilometer, also for maintenance. That's one of the comments. How are we doing on time, Mr. Riveros? I think we are okay. I think we have some extra time. We have 10 more minutes, but I think we have covered everything, and we have discussed these topics uh, in depth, and I think we are all on the same page regarding our contributions. Maybe, I don't know if there's any questions from the chat that we can ask our representatives from the multilateral organizations like Alejandra or Hector. For example, what are the challenges that you've been able to identify for the design and execution of local roads? What can you tell us about, for example, the situation in Paraguay? Uh, Maybe we are too ambitious in Paraguay because we want to have a very high standard, or whether we should take a more gradual approach to enhancements. Can you make any comments about that?
Bueno, sí, eso es justamente uno de los desafíos y también lo
Okay,
comentábamos,
yes,
¿no? O sea,
this is one of
políticas
the
públicas
challenges
un
today.
cambio
The Public Work Ministry is proposing a change in standards and also to guarantee higher level of service and a better use of the investment, especially in those enhancements with an overlay, an asphalt overlay. So we need to analyze the intervention criteria when we design an operation or when we start a new tender bidding. We need to be based on the level of service, the economic impact, and the social impact based on the improvement of those roads. So one of the research works or some technical comments we would like to say is that we have made some changes. For example, we started with gravel roads, and then we moved to asphalt overlays in order to improve roads. And we are going to analyze the impact of all those changes and also to have new criteria and new instruments for the design of new projects. So when we finish the current program, we want to evaluate these improvements in road standards and to be able to produce a manual or some technical specification about the expected levels of service and the expected impacts on the improvement of those roads. Our experience are more or less along those lines. As Fabio said, perhaps we are too ambitious. Of course, it's understandable that you have a social demand for better roads or for having the highest quality of road surfaces or road overlays, but we need to prioritize the investment, and we need to adjust investment to the needs, to the actual needs. So communities that demand a particular type of infrastructure that perhaps may not be necessary. So in these cases, we should have prepared a type of information or communication telling them about, for example, with the solution they want to have, we could have 100 kilometers. But if we have a different option with adjusted design, we could have 300 or 400 kilometers done. And so we need to involve the communities also, the stakeholders, the municipalities in these discussions in order to communicate all this to them. If I may, I would like to say something along the same lines. My experience is that producers, people living in rural areas need the road to get in and out of their fields, of their, whether it's pavement, gravel, or dirt. So of course, once you get used to having a good condition of a dirt road that cannot be used when it rains, but yet you can use it during the rest of the year, these people would like to have their road in good conditions and that can be used throughout the year, all year round. And once maybe gravel, in our case, was to improve the road with gravel and you stabilize the road, you can use it all year round. And so now they want a better road and they want payments. And so we should offer roads that can be used, first of all, almost all year, except on rainy days, then to improve them so that they can be used more or less comfortably during the rainy days and then get to payment. But payment has different costs, and there's no way that we can pave all rural roads. I'm talking about main roads. In a road network, in the case of Chaco, for example, there are consortiums that have 200 kilometers for maintenance. Some others have 1,000 kilometers, and not all of them are main roads. We need to prioritize the main roads. We keep them in the best condition to intervene after rains on those main roads and then go to the less important roads and then try to improve them with gravel, for example, and finally think about payment. That's my idea on the whole process. Just a question, Carlos. Given my years here in the ministry, I have gone through different stages. When I started in the ministry, we have a lot of dirt roads at the time, but we had restricted traffic during rainy days. So at the time, we had certain barriers. We implemented barriers that closed the roads until they got dried up. But in spite of the fact that we have less equipment, less machinery than compared to those we have today, those roads were not so costly to maintain. Then, with a new constitution in 92, free traffic was guaranteed to all people. I think that it was considered that those barriers should be lifted. And the lower level of service was reduced because to repair a road where there's no restriction during rainy days, the condition of those roads were very poor after rainy days. So investment was higher. So my question is, do you have any traffic restriction during rainy days, or roads are open under every situation? So currently it's a free traffic. We attempted to implement some type of restrictions with some fines, but it was not successful. So that idea of applying fines, no, was discarded, but all the local roads maintained by the consortiums are not so broken down compared to the ones that we have to maintain in the road administration, because those repairing the roads are the neighbors of those who have broken down the road. And so all of them know each other. And so they say, come on, so stop, just wait for 3 or 4 hours and don't go through the road. I'm not saying that if we have a rainy period of 3 or 4, 6 days of rain, of course, the roads are going to be deteriorated because people need to move for buying food or any other thing. But in other situations, when you have one day of rain, if you can wait half a day, 4, 5 hours for the road to dry up, is what happens. Since all of them know each other, since all the neighbors already know those members of the consortium, they try to wait and they try to keep better maintenance of the road. Thank you very much, Engineer Navarro, for your answer. And I would like to thank all the panel members of this round table on this session of financing in this international seminar on rural roads, accessibility and connectivity for development. Engineer Riveros, I think that we can get now to the closing ceremony. Yes, I would really like to thank everybody for their active participation and their contributions. We that have a long experience in these could keep on discussing these issues, but really I would like to thank all the participants in this round table. We had a lot of contributions, and this is food for thought for us to keep on thinking how to optimize all the resources we already have and how to get more resources. And thank you very much. And then Andrea, I give you back the floor to continue with the agenda. Thank you very much. Thank you, engineering, for moderating this roundtable, this highly informative roundtable of financing of rural roads. I would like to thank all the presenters we have today, Engineer Aguayo, Engineer Paula, Christian Dunkley, Albert Carlos Navarro, Hugo Miranda from Paraguay, who helped us to moderate the Q&A session of the first part of this day. And I would like to thank all our participants and speakers and all the panel members on this roundtable, Salinas, Facundo Salinas, Ovaldo Aguayo, Héctor Varela, Engineer Navarro. Thank you, Engineer Caldo. And now we will get to the closing ceremony of our seminar. I would like to thank PIARC and the Ministry of Public Works from Paraguay and the Road Association of Paraguay. And we will give the floor to Engineer Suleiman Osman. He's the president of International Committee 2.2 from PIARC. Engineer Suleiman, are you here with us? Are you connected? Hello, Suleiman. Well, hello, Andrea. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. I think that we are getting to the end of our seminars, the seminar of 3 days. We have had over 100 participants, and these seminars had 5 sessions. The first one was on accessibility and mobility in rural areas. Next, we had a session on road safety and gender inclusion. Third session was on technical solutions. And finally, the 5th session was on the financing of rural roads. And throughout these 5 sessions, we were able to discuss everything related to communication. We started in Latin America, then we went to Europe, Africa, Asia, and all countries were able to tell us about their experience with rural roads. All of them had the possibility of sharing their experience. We really thank Paraguayan authorities for organizing this seminar. I would like to thank especially the vice president of the Paraguayan Road Association, and also would like to thank Andrea Perez for her moderation of this seminar, and I would like to thank all the PIARC group, specifically Technical Committee 2.2, which has really made a great effort to make this seminar possible. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the Technical Committee 2.2. You know that we are very few. And in spite of that, all of us made great efforts in order to be able to have all the presentations ready for this seminar. So keep on with this work. We are going to have another seminar in South Africa next year, and then we will have the World Road Congress in Prague. And so let's keep on working in order to meet all our goals. And I would like to thank all the presenters or the speakers for their availability. Thank you for your presentations. Thank you for sharing your experiences with all of us. I really want to thank everybody and have a good day. Thank you very much.
Suleiman Osiman, gracias por todo y por toda esta, formar parte de esta.
Thank you, Engineer Suleiman Osiman, and thanks to all of the participants and the organizers of this event. Now we give the floor to Guillermo Mas, the president of the Road Association of Paraguay, for the closing remarks.
Bueno, muy buenas tardes a todos.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. On behalf of my colleagues from the Road Association of Paraguay, I would like to give these final remarks to close these 3 days, dealing with interesting matters, especially for our region. This event on rural roads was organized by PIARC, by the Ministry of Public Works and Communications, and the Road Association of Paraguay, having Paraguay as the host country. We want to thank PIARC and the World Road Association, Miguel Caso Flores, who made it possible for Paraguay to be part of this great network with more than 124 countries, where they foster the exchange of knowledge and communication about roads. We also want to thank the Ministry of Public Works and Communications of Paraguay through Arnoldo Win and Engineer Segovia, the Vice Minister, and everybody in the Paraguayan Association of Roads, PIARC, for the organization of this international event to give us access to all issues that have to do with road safety and technical works and inclusion of women in rural roads, like the experiences we saw in Burkina Faso, in Mexico, Costa Rica, and presentations from the experience in Paraguay and other countries in the region, such as Argentina, Peru, Chile. And we also heard about Mali and the UK. So I want to thank you, everybody, on behalf of the Paraguayan Road Association, to all the members of the roundtables from the different organizations, members of PIARC and road associations from the organizing countries and the other countries. And I want to highlight how significant this seminar was, with more than 700 participants. I want to thank the Argentine Road Association, Chile Road Association, and Uruguay Road Association. And with this, I want to say goodbye and invite you all to the Paraguayan Congress on Road Safety and Traffic that is going to take place in Paraguay for 2 days. This is going to be our 4th edition of this event. So everybody is kindly invited. And I also want to invite all of the professionals participating, all the Paraguayan professionals participating in this seminar, to be members of the Road Association of Paraguay, because that would mean to network and to be part of a member of a network of contacts that is very important and interesting. Again, I want to thank all of the speakers and everybody participating for their time these 3 days. So with that, I'm saying goodbye and see you in the next